The villagers never looked at me with kindness. To them, I was nothing more than a poor farmer with cracked hands and a bent back, a man destined to live and die in the dust of forgotten soil. My clothes, stitched too many times to count, hung loose on my frame. My hut leaned like it was tired of standing. And yet, though hunger chewed at my belly and the sky refused to give us rain, I kept my faith. I worked the fields every morning as if the land might, at last, reward me. But fate, as I would soon learn, does not whisper. It strikes like a hammer. That evening, when the sun fell like a bleeding ember beyond the dry horizon, something happened that tore apart the silence of my small, invisible life. I was returning from the field with an empty sack, my steps heavy when the earth beneath me moaned. Not like a rock shifting, nor the wind rolling through hollow ground. No, it was a deep, shuddering groan, as though the soil itself was alive. I froze. At first I thought my mind was playing tricks. Days without enough food had left me weak, dizzy. Yet the sound came again, louder this time. My heart thrashed against my ribs. The ground trembled lightly under my bare feet, as if something hidden was clawing at the world from below. In that moment, fear and curiosity tangled inside me. The night around me thickened, the field suddenly unfamiliar, shadows stretching long like fingers across the cracked earth. The moon, pale and thin, had risen, spilling a cold glow that made the moment feel less like life, and more like a vision. I knelt, pressing my ear to the ground, and then I heard it clearly, a hum, low, resonant, and steady, like a forgotten song carried through stone. It pulsed beneath the surface, vibrating the soil, rattling my bones. My breath caught. No animal could make such a sound. No trick of the wind could hum like a voice without words. I pulled my head back, my chest rising and falling as if I had run miles. The urge to flee filled me, but my legs felt bound to that spot. Somewhere deep within me, an ancient instinct whispered, "You have touched the edge of something not meant for men." The hum faded. The silence that followed was unbearable, heavier than the noise itself. I staggered to my feet, my eyes scanning the horizon. The village was distant, its lanterns like faint stars. I could go back, pretend I had heard nothing, pretend the world had not for a moment revealed its hidden breath, but the air around me was thick with an invisible weight, as if the ground had secrets it could no longer bear to keep. I pressed my palm to the dirt, trembling. For a second, just one, it burned hot, like fire trapped beneath stone. I yanked my hand back, staring at the dark soil, now silent, now ordinary, and then I realized, this was not ordinary at all. The whispers of the villagers returned to me, the way they mocked me at the well, their cruel laughter echoing. Poor fool, he'll die digging holes in dead land. They saw me as nothing, a man cursed with empty hands. But as I stood there staring at the trembling ground, something stirred in my heart. Not hope, not yet, but a question. What was buried beneath me? That night I could not sleep. The hum echoed in my skull, vibrating against my thoughts. I lay in the dark of my crooked hut, listening to the chorus of crickets outside, but nothing could drown the memory. The earth had spoken. I had heard its voice, and if the earth speaks, it demands to be answered. The rooster did not crow in my yard anymore. Perhaps it had grown too weak from hunger like the rest of us. Dawn crept in silently, painting the horizon with a gray that promised no harvest, only another day of thirst. I rose from the woven mat on the floor of my hut, my bones aching, my muscles stiff from toil and malnutrition. Yet habit pushed me forward, as it always did. A farmer does not rise for luxury. He rises because the land demands it. My hut was a skeleton of wood and clay, patched with straw, leaning like an old man too tired to stand upright. Inside, a single clay pot held a little water, carefully guarded like treasure. A wooden bowl carried some dry maize, not enough for a week. On the wall a wooden cross hung, crooked but constant, its shadow long in the dim morning light. That cross was my anchor. Without it, I would have drowned long ago in despair. I stepped outside into the breath of morning air which carried no promise of rain. The earth stretched endlessly in brown scars, cracked like the skin of a dying beast. Once these fields had been generous. My father used to tell me stories of days when cornstalks danced like soldiers in green uniforms, when beans grew thick and heavy, when the soil had life. But that was long before the sky closed itself, long before the river shrank into a ribbon of mud. The drought had no mercy. Every day the sun rose like a tyrant, punishing us with its heat. The children in the village coughed with dry throats. Women lined up at the well before dawn, waiting to collect water that tasted of rust and dust. And men like me, with nothing but faith and stubborn hands, bent our backs to the soil that no longer wished to feed us. Still, I worked. I believed, or at least I tried to believe, that the land would one day forgive us. The villagers saw me as a fool. They laughed when I carried my wooden plow, dragged by a single weary ox that looked older than me. They mocked when I prayed aloud in the field, whispering to the soil as though it might hear me. To them, prayer was wasted breath. To me, it was the only thing left that kept my heart alive. Look at him, they would sneer at the market, begging heaven for corn while his stomach starves. Poor wretch, he should beg for coins instead. Their laughter was cruel, but I bore it. I had nothing but my dignity, and though it was small, I would not give it away. At home, the nights were long. The roof leaked when rare storms passed, and the cold winds found their way through the cracks in the walls. Hunger made sleep shallow. My body ached, but my spirit, though bruised, remained upright. I told myself, a man with faith is never truly empty, and yet I could not lie. I dreamed of more, not riches, not palaces, but simply a harvest strong enough to feed my family, to silence the cruel tongues of my neighbors, to prove that even a poor farmer could rise. My days were a cycle of labor and hope. At dawn, I tilled the stubborn soil. At noon, I wiped sweat from my brow, watching the sky for clouds that never came. At dusk, I carried home nothing but dust clinging to my skin. Still, I found moments of quiet beauty. The sound of my ox breathing beside me, steady and loyal. The song of a lone bird that had not yet abandoned this cursed land. The way the stars lit the heavens at night, so sharp and countless they seemed like windows into another world. In those moments, I told myself I was rich in ways others could not see. My pockets were empty, but my heart held stories, memories, and a stubborn kind of love for the land that betrayed me daily. But love can only endure so much suffering before it bends into desperation. The drought dragged on. The little maize I had planted withered into brittle stalks, their leaves curling like dead hands. I chewed on kernels that tasted like dust, swallowing bitterness with every bite. My ox grew thinner, its ribs showing, its eyes dull. There were nights when I thought of leaving, of abandoning the field my father had given me. But leaving would mean surrender, and surrender was a kind of death. I had promised myself I would not die before the land gave me one last gift, and so I stayed. The villagers grew harsher. They said I was cursed, that my stubborn prayers offended heaven itself. Children pointed at me when I passed, their laughter ringing in my ears. The rich landowner on the far side of the village, a man whose field still grew thanks to hidden wells, looked at me with disdain. A farmer without fortune is not a farmer, he once said to me, his voice smooth as oil, sharp as a knife. His words burned deeper than the sun, but I endured, because somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the hunger and the ridicule, I held on to a quiet truth. Everything changes. No drought lasts forever. No suffering is eternal. Even the poorest soil hides secrets beneath its surface, and sometimes fate chooses the most broken man to reveal them. The day of the hum, when the earth sang beneath my feet, was not just an accident. Looking back, I believe it was the moment all of my poverty, my prayers, my humiliation, collided with destiny. For years the world had stripped me of dignity, of strength, of hope, but fate, cruel as it is, sometimes bends in strange ways. I had always believed heaven listened, even when it was silent. That night, when the ground trembled and the soil hummed like a secret hymn, I knew at last something was listening, something buried in the bones of the earth, something waiting for me. The night after I first heard the hum, sleep abandoned me. I tossed on my mat, the dry straw scratching my back, my mind replaying that sound again and again. It was no echo of wind, no trick of tired ears. It had weight, resonance, like the earth itself was alive beneath my feet. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the ground breathing, whispering in a language older than men. By dawn, my decision was made. I had to return. The village stirred slowly that morning. Women bent over buckets at the well, their voices low with gossip. Children ran barefoot through the dust, their laughter shrill, their ribs showing through thin shirts. I passed by, silent, feeling their eyes on me. Some smirked. Some shook their heads. To them, I was still the same fool, clinging to a cursed piece of land. None of them knew what I had heard. I carried my hoe across my shoulder, its wooden handle smooth from years of use. It was the only tool I owned that had not broken under time's cruelty. As I walked toward the field where the earth had groaned, my heart pounded with a rhythm almost in tune with the memory of the hum. The sun rose quickly, spilling its merciless light across the barren fields. My ox trudged beside me, ribs sharp beneath its hide. I tied it to a post at the edge of the field. Today I would not ask it to plow. Today my hands would dig where fate had pointed me. The spot was easy to find. The soil there looked no different from the rest. Dry, cracked, lifeless. Yet as I stepped onto it, a shiver ran up my spine. My body remembered what my mind tried to dismiss. This was the place. I sank the blade of my hoe into the dirt. The ground resisted, hard as stone, but I pressed harder. The first strike released a puff of dust, choking my lungs. The second dug a shallow scar. I kept striking, sweat rolling down my temples, until the earth began to loosen. At first, nothing happened. Only silence. Only the sound of my own labored breath. Doubt gnawed at me. Was it hunger that made me hear things? Was madness finally creeping in? Then, just as I leaned to rest, the hum returned, faint, low. A vibration that traveled up through the handle of my hoe into my arms. My breath caught in my chest. The soil beneath me trembled slightly, almost like a heartbeat. Fear clawed at me. I nearly dropped the hoe. My instinct screamed, "Leave. Cover the hole. Forget this place." But another voice, quieter yet stronger, whispered, "No, this is meant for you." I dug deeper. The hum grew louder, steadier, not like a song now, but like a call, beckoning me further. Dust stung my eyes. My hands blistered, but I did not stop. I clawed at the dirt with bare fingers when the hoe slipped. Every strike, every handful of earth removed, felt like peeling back the skin of the world. Hours passed. The sun blazed above me. My throat cracked with thirst, but still I dug. My arms trembled from exhaustion, yet I felt pulled forward by something greater than hunger, greater than fear. Then, my hand struck something. Not stone, not root. Something smooth, hard, cold against my blistered skin. I froze. The hum was loud now, vibrating through the object itself. I scraped away more soil, my fingers trembling. Slowly, it revealed itself. A surface curved, metallic, gleaming faintly even under the dust. My heart slammed against my chest. What was this? A pot? A chest? Some buried relic? I uncovered more. The object was larger than my arm could span. Its surface bore strange markings, not letters, not symbols I knew, but patterns that seemed to shift when I stared too long, twisting like smoke trapped in metal. The hum pulsed from it, steady as breath. I recoiled, my back hitting the edge of the pit. My chest heaved, my mind spinning. Every story I had ever heard from old men around the fire returned to me. Tales of spirits trapped beneath the earth, of curses left by ancestors, of treasures guarded by demons. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. The object seemed to hold me, as though the very air around it had gripped my bones. Its hum resonated in my chest, slowing my heartbeat until it matched its rhythm. For the first time in years, the world around me, the dust, the hunger, the cruelty of men, fell silent. It was just me and the hum. "Who are you?" I whispered, though no one was near. My voice trembled like a child's. The object did not answer, yet somehow I felt heard. I reached out a hand slowly, cautiously. My fingers hovered inches above the surface, heat radiating from it. When my skin finally brushed against the metal, a shock surged through me. Not pain, but a wave of energy that rushed up my arm, through my chest, filling me with a sensation I cannot describe. It was like drinking water after years of thirst, like breathing after drowning. I staggered back, gasping. The hum stopped. Silence. I blinked, disoriented, my hands shaking. The object now lay silent and cold, half buried in the earth. The markings on its surface no longer shifted, only glimmered faintly, like embers in ash. I sat at the edge of the pit until the sun began to fall, torn between terror and awe. I did not know what I had unearthed. Treasure? Curse? Miracle? All I knew was that my life, once invisible, had been touched by something vast and unfathomable. As darkness crept across the sky, I covered the pit loosely with dirt, enough to hide its secret from prying eyes. My body ached, my mind whirled, but my heart burned with a strange fire. That night, When I returned to my hut, the villagers laughed again as I passed. They did not see the dust on my skin as anything more than failure. They did not know what my hands had touched, but I knew. The earth had spoken to me, and what it said would not let me go. The following days felt unreal, as though I had stepped out of my own life and into a story whispered by old men around the fire. I walked among the villagers, carrying my buckets, tending my ox, speaking little, but inside me, a storm raged. The object's hum still lived in my chest, an echo that would not fade. At night I felt it in my dreams, glowing patterns, shifting light, voices I could not understand. I tried to push it away. I tried to believe it was nothing, a trick of hunger, a hallucination born of thirst and desperation. But every morning when I stood in my field, I felt its presence calling from beneath the soil, and the more I felt it, the more dangerous it became to hide. One evening as I returned from the well, 2 villagers walked behind me, whispering just loud enough for my ears. "He's gone mad," one said. "Always digging, always staring at the dirt." The other replied, "Maybe he really is cursed." Their laughter followed me down the path. At home I sat by the faint glow of a lamp staring at my calloused hands. They had touched something no other man in the village had touched. But if I told them, they would not believe me. Or worse, they would believe, and the secret would no longer be mine. The next morning I went back to the pit. I uncovered the object again, brushing away the dirt. The markings shimmered faintly in the sun. I touched it once more, carefully. No shock this time, only warmth like the pulse of a hidden fire. Then I heard footsteps. I leapt back, heart hammering. At the edge of the field stood Matteo, my closest neighbor. He was younger, stronger, a man who often mocked me at the market, but whose eyes, at this moment, held no laughter. He looked at the pit, at the strange glimmer within it. "What are you hiding?" he asked. My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, to cover it quickly with soil, but my hands would not move fast enough. He had seen. "Nothing," I said too quickly. Matteo stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "That is no stone, no root. What is it?" I shook my head. "It's nothing. Leave it." But curiosity is a fire that spreads faster than drought. He crouched, peering into the hole. His hand reached toward the surface. "Don't," I snapped, louder than I intended. He froze, surprised at the strength in my voice. For a long moment, silence lay between us, broken only by the faint rustle of wind over the barren field. Then he smirked. "You've finally found something, haven't you? After all your prayers, after all your foolish work, maybe the earth listened." His tone cut me, not with kindness, but with greed. "Say nothing," I whispered, stepping closer. "This is not for you. Do you hear me? Say nothing." Matteo's eyes glimmered with something darker than curiosity. He rose to his feet slowly, brushing dirt from his trousers. "Secrets don't last in this village," he said, "especially when the poor try to keep them." And with that he walked away. I covered the pit again, my hands shaking. Fear gnawed at me, not of the object itself, but of men. I knew Matteo's kind. His hunger was not for bread, but for power. He would not forget what he saw. That night, sleep once again abandoned me. Every creak of the hut, every cry of a distant dog made me sit upright, convinced Matteo would return with others. My mind raced. Should I unearth the object fully and hide it elsewhere? But it was too large, too heavy. It belonged to the earth. Days passed. Matteo said nothing, but his silence was worse than laughter. He watched me at the market, his eyes sharp, calculating. Other villagers whispered more than usual when I walked by. I felt the circle tightening. Then came the landowner. Don Esteban was his name, a man whose wealth gleamed in every polished boot and gold button on his coat. He rode a strong horse, his mustache curled, his eyes cold. He stopped at my field one afternoon, his gaze sweeping over the cracked soil, the pit half covered with dirt. "Matteo speaks of strange things in your land," he said, his voice smooth and heavy with authority. "He says the earth sings here." My blood turned to ice. "It's only foolish talk," I said quickly. "The earth is silent, as it always is." Esteban dismounted, his boots sinking into the dust. He crouched by the pit, brushing aside some dirt with his glove. "And yet," he said softly, "I hear it too." He pressed his ear to the ground. I held my breath, terrified the hum would return, but the soil lay quiet, as if mocking me. Esteban stood again, his eyes narrowing. "If there is something here, farmer, it belongs to me. This land, even if you pretend it is yours, bends to my will. Remember that." He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving dust swirling in his wake. I sank to my knees, the weight of his words crushing me. The secret was no longer mine. The object had been entrusted to me by fate, yet men hungered for it now. That evening, as I sat outside my hut, the stars glittering above, I whispered a prayer, not for food, not for rain, but for strength. Lord, if you sent this to me, give me courage to guard it. Let me not fail. And in the silence of the night, I thought I heard the hum again, faint, like a heartbeat under the earth. It comforted me, even as fear coiled tighter around my soul. The days ahead would not be kind. The night came heavy, as though the sky itself wished to crush me beneath its weight. My hut felt too small, too fragile to contain the storm that brewed within me. Mateo's silence, Esteban's threats, both pressed on my chest like stones. I could not rest. I could not wait. The object beneath the earth pulsed in my thoughts, demanding, calling. When the moon rose high and pale, I rose from my mat, took my hoe, and walked into the night. The village slept, its lanterns dark. Only the dogs stirred, howling softly, as if they sensed what I carried in my heart. The field stretched before me like a graveyard. The wind was cold, sharp, carrying with it the smell of dust. My ox lifted its head from the ground as I passed, eyes glimmering in the moonlight, but it made no sound. I reached the pit. My hands trembled as I pushed the soil aside faster than before, desperate. Sweat clung to my skin, though the air was cool. The earth seemed to resist me, heavier with every handful, as though it knew what I sought to uncover. But I pressed on, my breath ragged, my muscles burning. At last the object revealed itself fully. It was massive, far larger than I had imagined, a curved dome of metal stretching deeper into the ground. Its surface shimmered with pale light, as though the moon itself had been trapped inside it. The markings that once shifted faintly now burned bright, flowing like liquid fire across the surface. And then it began to hum, not faint, not low, but loud, resonant, shaking the earth beneath me. The sound wrapped around my chest, rattling my bones, filling the night sky with a song that seemed both holy and terrifying. My knees buckled. I clutched the edge of the pit, gasping. The ground shuddered. Dust rose in clouds. My heart thundered with fear, but also awe. Then, with a sound like cracking stone, a seam opened in the object's surface. A line of light split the dome, brighter than fire, sharper than lightning. I shielded my eyes, my body trembling. It opened. From the gap, a radiance poured out, spilling across the field. Not the cold glow of the moon, not the cruel blaze of the sun, but a light alive, warm, golden. It touched my skin, and I felt my hunger vanish, my thirst dissolve, my wounds, my blisters, the aches in my bones, gone as though erased by invisible hands. I stumbled back, tears burning my eyes. Inside the opening, shapes moved, patterns of light, flowing like rivers. They twisted, coiled, and then rose, forming an image I cannot describe with the words of men. It was not man, not beast, not spirit as I had been taught to fear. It was something vast, something ancient, a presence. And then, it spoke, not with words, but with a voice that echoed directly inside my skull, a voice that carried weight, power, yet also tenderness. You have endured. I fell to my knees, my face pressed to the soil, my hands shook, my heart pounded. You were mocked, broken, forgotten, yet you did not abandon the earth, and so the earth does not abandon you. The light swelled brighter, wrapping me like a cloak. My chest heaved with sobs I had buried for years, sobs of hunger, humiliation, despair. For the first time I felt seen, not by men, not by cruel villagers, but by something greater. The voice continued. Guardians placed this seed of light long before your fathers walked these lands. Few were chosen to awaken it. You, farmer, have been chosen, not for wealth, not for power, but for faith, for humility. I lifted my head slowly, tears streaking my face. Why me? I whispered, my voice hoarse. The presence seemed to smile within the light. Because the proud would destroy it. The greedy would abuse it. Only one who has known emptiness can protect abundance. Only one who has been denied can understand the gift. The object pulsed, and the field trembled. All around me, the cracked soil softened, darkened, as though rain had finally fallen. Shoots of green pushed upward, fragile but alive. Grass, flowers, life itself bursting forth where moments before there had been nothing. My breath caught. I touched the new grass with trembling fingers. It was real. The barren land cursed for so long was awakening. And then I heard voices, real voices, human voices, rising in the distance. Torches flickered along the path. Villagers. Mateo was among them, and Esteban rode his horse at their lead. They had come, drawn by the light, by the trembling earth. Panic surged in me. This was not meant for them. This was not theirs. The light dimmed slightly, as though sensing my fear. "Do not be afraid," the voice said. "Truth cannot be hidden forever, but it will protect itself through you." The villagers reached the edge of the field, their eyes wide, their mouths open in shock at the sight of green life sprouting from the once dead earth. Some fell to their knees, weeping. Others cried out in fear. Esteban, however, dismounted and strode forward, his eyes locked on the glowing object. "It is mine," he said, his voice sharp, trembling with greed. "Whatever it is, it belongs to me." He stepped into the pit, reaching toward the light. In that instant, the hum rose like thunder. A shockwave burst from the object, hurling him backward into the dust. He screamed, clutching his chest as though the very breath had been ripped from him. The torches flickered, nearly extinguished. The villagers gasped. Fear and awe painted their faces. I remained on my knees, my head bowed. The voice echoed once more, softer now, fading. "Rise, farmer. Guard what has been given. For in you, the earth has found a son." The light receded slowly, the seam closing, the hum softening until silence returned. The object sank deeper into the ground, the soil folding over it, as though it had never been disturbed. Only the grass, the flowers, the sudden life across the field remained as proof. The villagers stood stunned, staring at me, not with mockery, not with laughter, but with fear, with reverence. And for the first time, I was no longer invisible. The days that followed felt like waking into another world. Where once my land had been a grave of dust, now it bloomed with green. Tender shoots pushed upward each morning, stretching toward the sun as though the earth itself had been reborn. The villagers who had once spit cruel words at me now came quietly, their faces filled with awe. They no longer laughed when they passed me at the well. They no longer called me cursed. Instead, they whispered, uncertain, as if afraid to speak too loudly in the presence of what had happened. And Esteban, the proud landowner who had tried to claim the gift, he no longer came. He remained in his house, weakened, his arrogance broken. Some said he had lost his strength that night. Others said the earth had marked him, punishing his greed. Whatever the truth, he no longer ruled with the same voice of thunder. His eyes, when they met mine across the market, were heavy with something like fear. Yet I felt no triumph. I did not rise each day to glory in their silence or their fear. I rose as I always had, to tend the soil, to give thanks, to work with my hands. For though the field had changed, I remained the same man. The cracks in my hands did not vanish. My hut still leaned. My clothes still bore the marks of age. And yet, something deeper had shifted. When I placed seeds in the earth, I no longer wondered if they would grow. I no longer prayed with desperation, begging the sky to hear me. I prayed with gratitude, knowing the earth itself had spoken, had chosen to answer in its own time. Some nights, when the stars burned bright above me, I would walk into the field alone. I would kneel, pressing my hand against the soil. The hum was gone, silent as though it had returned to sleep, but I could still feel it, faint, deep within me, like an ember in my chest. The villagers began to treat me differently. Some brought gifts of bread, of fruit, small offerings placed at my door. Others asked me to bless their seeds, their fields, their wells. I told them I was no priest, no saint, I was only a farmer. But they shook their heads, insisting that heaven had touched me. Perhaps they were right, but I knew the truth was simpler. Heaven had not chosen me for greatness. It had chosen me because I was nothing, because I had lived my life with empty hands, because I had been patient, because I had not surrendered when all reason told me to. And so I understood the gift was not mine alone. The field bloomed not for my stomach, but for the village. The water that seeped into the soil was not meant only for my lips, but for the children who had gone thirsty, for the mothers who had wept over empty bowls. The miracle was not for me, it was for us all. Still, the villagers looked at me with eyes I could not grow used to. Reverence is its own kind of burden, but I bore it, because I remembered the voice. Guard what has been given. Guarding did not mean hiding. It meant protecting, nurturing, sharing. So I shared. I opened my field to those who hungered. I gave maize to those who mocked me once. I poured water into the cups of those who had laughed at my prayers, not because they deserved it, but because I knew what it was to be empty. And with each act, I felt the soil grow stronger, the plants rise taller, the land breathe freer. In time, the village itself transformed. Children no longer cried with thirst. Women no longer lined at the well for water that tasted of rust. Even the barren hills around us began to sprout with green, as though the miracle had spread its roots outward, touching all it found. I remained the same poor farmer in their eyes, but no longer humiliated, no longer mocked. They saw in me what they had refused before, dignity, and I saw in myself what I had nearly lost, hope. Now when I stand at the edge of my field, I think back to the night when the earth first hummed beneath my feet. I remember the fear, the doubt, the loneliness, and I realize the truth was never about treasure or power. The treasure was faith, the power was endurance. For the earth does not reveal its secrets to the proud nor to the greedy. It reveals them to the humble, the forgotten, the broken, those who cling to hope when hope is nowhere to be found. And so I live each day not as a man who found a miracle, but as a man entrusted with one. The earth spoke, I listened, and in that listening I was remade.